So now this Innoson case versus GT Bank case receives quite a lot of traction on social media, and I'd like for you to first break down how we got to this point where we are now.
Well, there was a transactional dispute between GT Bank, Nigerian Customs Services, and then Innoson Motors Nigeria. And then Innoson got a judgment in 2011 for which the court ordered that the sum of 2.4 billion naira be paid to him as the judgment sum, okay? And then the bank didn't do that, didn't pay. They appealed. The judgment went to the Court of Appeal. They lost at the Court of Appeal. That means Innoson Motors won at the Court of Appeal. And then they went to the Supreme Court. And just recently, the Supreme Court also upheld the judgment of the Court of First Instance and then the Court of Appeal. And then the implication now is that there was a 22.2% interest rate, okay, that the bank also levied alongside the judgment, okay, for which it has now grown to about 8 plus billion naira as we speak now. And then the implication of that is that at this stage, the judgment creditor, which is Innoson Motors, had now gone back to the Court of First Instance to then apply for the writ of FIFA, which was granted. And what the writ of FIFA means is that it empowers the sheriff of the court to seize the properties of the judgment debtor and then sell same and then use it to offset the judgment debts.
But are they just going to arbitrarily just seize any property? Is there no order to this effect as to the valuation of the property that's going to be seized and how much it will be to offset the amount in question?
Yeah, the writ given to the sheriff of the court, okay, is the authority from the court. And then the sheriff will now go ahead to bring the evaluators and all the authorities involved in evaluating the cost of the property. Because in enforcing judgment like this, you must not exceed the judgment sum, okay? That is to say that the Innoson Motors, that judgment creditor, is going to take over the asset of the bank to the tune of the judgment sum. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding and then a lot of confusion as regards what is happening. Some people feel that the Innoson Motors is going to take over the entire bank.
Yes, because that is what has been making around on social media, and a lot of people don't understand the process.
That's because the media even had a bad shoot on it. The conventional, traditional media in Nigeria wrote out there that in the headlines, Innoson set out to take over GT Bank. That is not the case. The judgment of the court is not that the judgment creditor takes over the entire bank. The judgment creditor is expected through the sheriff of the court, through the authority of the writ of FIFA, to take over the assets of the bank to the tune of the judgment debt, which is the 8 plus billion naira. And that is what is expected. So a lot of people, there were a lot of panic here and there. People are saying, what is going to happen to our funds? I have to go and pull my funds. I have to go and do this and that. And I said it's unnecessary. We've been able to educate a lot of people on this, that what is at risk is the asset of the bank and then the shareholders. Okay, as regards your deposit is insured under the NDIC.
Yeah,
okay?
because I was going to talk about
and it's protected. You understand? Every bank in Nigeria must have that cover. And you also have the recapitalization fund with the Central Bank of Nigeria. So you have a full cover of depositors' funds, both insurance and then recapitalization. So you do not have to, people don't have to panic whatsoever. And we must emphasize again that the judgment sum, okay, is what is the execution is levied against, okay, to the extent at which the debt endures, or the amount of the debt, that is what will be taken off. And it's not that Innoson Motors will now take over the bank and become the MD and all that.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the role of the regulatory agencies in this, the Central Bank, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and then the NDIC, and how they can bring some order into how this whole process is carried out so as to allay the fears?
Yeah, as it stands now, the bank have exhausted all its options of appeal by law, having reached the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court having upheld judgment of the lower courts. So it is therefore important and imperative at this juncture that the judgment creditor will enforce the judgment, and they have already started enforcement, okay? Because the rule of the law is that the judgment creditor must reap the fruit of his judgment. It is settled law, okay? If it is settled law, and then the bank operates in their pursuit of corporate governance, understands this, that the options, they are true with their options, okay? So it's left for the bank now to relinquish. Whether or not they relinquish the authority, the judgment creditor has from the court is to enforce judgment. And nobody can really stop that, because that is the highest court of the land. The highest court of the land has given judgment to the effect that you take over the assets.
Okay, but let's look at scenarios here. So is it possible that there's still an option for an out-of-court settlement between both parties? And also, I'd like you to speak to what the worst-case scenario can play out to be.
Well, an out-of-court settlement would have been possible before now, okay? Because I remember that at some point when we discussed these issues on some other network stations, we were able to make the position clear that the corporate organization need not battle these fears with, you know, a company of that nature, that it would have been easier or better to settle out of court before now, because is when transactions like this have gone commercial transactions like this have gone it is important that both parties understand. But at this stage now, the parties will be looking at the judgment of the court and not the settlement, because the settlement that is required now is to obey the judgment of the court.
So what are the options for GT Bank right now?
Yeah, the options of
legal options, yeah.
Yeah, the legal options for GT Bank right now is to comply with the judgment of the court, and then allow for the sheriff to enforce the judgment. Whether or not they allow the sheriff, the sheriff will still go ahead to do same.
But we've seen reports on some local media talking about the fact that a branch on Monday in Enugu, GT Bank that was trying to be closed, you know, through this process, was the staff actually prevented, you know, that from happening.
Well, there's going to be resistance here and there, but you know that when you enforce judgment with the law enforcement agencies. Okay, the law enforcement agencies will be deployed. Okay, the police commissioner of that state will be involved. All the security agencies of that state will be involved in the process. And it's for the enforcement of a valid, competent court order and court judgment. So whether the staff, they resist or whatsoever is a question of time. It's a matter of time. They will be weighed out by the authorities of the state.
All right, but do we have any judicial precedents, you know, any case similar to this that has happened in the past, and how this played out? Yeah,
there are a lot of judicial precedents. You know, when you go to the courts, for example, if you go to a court, you go to the sheriff section, you will see a lot of properties, loads, you know, people's properties. These are people who, you know, judgment have been enforced against. Okay, and when you go across, there are a lot of companies also, you find a sheriff of the court with law enforcement agencies attaching their vehicles and then park all the vehicles, as long as they are able to get the number of vehicles to the tune of the amount owed. If it's not enough, then they begin to attach their immovable property. Because the law is that you start from the movable properties. When you attach all the movable property and it's not sufficient, you move from the movable properties to the immovable properties until the judgment sum is recovered. And it's, until that is done, the enforcement will continue until you're able to get a judgment sum.
All right, then.